From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, great man. Corey has been a wonderful friend both on and off the air. I remember the first time I ever met him face-to-face in Canberra. He was very kind and he pulled me up for some things that I had said about him in the past. Once we got through that awkwardness of about 10 minutes, a fast friendship was formed. He's a lovely bloke. He was a credit to the Parliament. He's, of course, the leader of his family, and he's been a wonderful part of our family here at Sky News. We love you, brother. I'll miss you very, very deeply on the telly, but you're not losing me off the telly, and I'll see you in Coffin Bay much sooner rather than later. All the best to you and the family. All right, welcome to the last show for 2023 of Paul Murray Live. It'll be pretty much the same as everything else, with a few little predictions thrown in. But as always, I just want to say at the end of this year, thank you very much to you for your loyalty, your support on and off the telly. It doesn't matter whether it is in the biggest city airport or the smallest country town. There's nothing better than when somebody comes up and gives you a high five. Thank you for your support this year. I'll do the mushy stuff a little bit later, but we're not going anywhere. We're coming back next year, and there'll be plenty of TV here over the summer as well, with people filling in on Credlin and Bolt's program and plenty of things all the way up to Christmas and beyond. So believe me, you'll be well covered in prime time over the summer months. Now, let's get to some things, including shout out to everyone who's had a pretty wild weather weekend in Queensland. As we know, Jasper was starting to roll in on Thursday, and the rain has been falling ever since. Flooding's been a massive issue in huge parts of Queensland. Again, thanks to all the volunteers. And we've got to say this, so many volunteers. Wonderful thing about Australia, for all the times they tell us, oh, how racist and white supremacy and all the rest of it, reality is it doesn't matter who your neighbour is, we get together and we take care of them. We take care of them when they're in trouble, when they're in strife, when literally the water is at their doors, and as we've shown on this program many times, when charity is needed. Well done to everyone up there who's been fighting. The latest information from the officials is this.
Crews have become incredibly busy over the last 24 hours, over 50 requests for our swiftwater rescue response.
We've had reports of people swimming and driving into floodwaters. Please don't do that. The roadways underneath may be severely damaged.
So this is very serious and it could get worse.
And most importantly, it is the locals that take care of each other, the locals that when they hear these things are coming, get ready for the sandbags. Now, I know right now there's also bushfires happening in Western Australia. There will no doubt be plenty more problems over summer. But again, strength and love to everyone who needs it tonight.
I think our street's just a little bit underwater.
Stairs are under, aircon's under, rooms got at least 50 centimetres of water, if not a metre.
It's probably getting up to extreme level at the moment. Yeah, never seen it this high.
This is unprecedented, this amount of water that we've seen.
It's deep.
Oh, the cyclone is gone, but look at our back now.
Unbelievable. Everywhere's cut off, all the roads, major roads are flooded.
Now, it's not a very modest thing to say, but I certainly believe that this hour of television is the most honest hour of television because I don't hide how I feel. Now, 9 times out of 10, that's about strong opinions and getting fired up about the issues that you and I have been able to connect over each and every night. But I've got to say that it's also that because I continue to keep focus on the people who, generally speaking, the media doesn't prioritise. Every now and then they'll sort of mention them, but they're not the lead story. The lead story is often famous people or political people or powerful people. But all this year we have been laser focused on cost of living. We've been focused on that not because it has a political consequence, but because it is our fellow Australians, and we live in a country that is incredibly generous, has a wonderful social safety net, but there are too many people that are needing it at the moment, and there are even too many people that are starting to fall through it. Now, we've highlighted that each and every night because while the rest of the people who get paid to talk about politics say, shiny object over here, quick, talk about this. No, we're going to talk about this because this is the reality for millions of people around the country. And sadly, that is going to be even more highlighted this particular Christmas. And while most of us will be having fun, most of us will have bought that wonderful present or maybe one or two more as we choose to spoil our kids or spoil each other, of course the reality is that we need to remember two groups of people. Firstly, the groups of people who are alone this Christmas, and strength and love to all of you. And I know there's a lot of people who used to have big and busy Christmases, but their families have moved away or their partners have passed away, or they have always been on their own. They might be people that are working here but have family somewhere else. And again, strength and love to all of you. You will be in my thoughts in the coming days and, of course, on Christmas Day. But at a time when there's all of these people jumping around on social media about how excited they are to open their brand new expensive presents, there are people who are not going to be able to do that because of cost of living, because of the huge expense that life has, let alone special days or bigger days. And of course, there are kids that are going to know that they're having a different Christmas than anyone else. And I want to say to the parents that are going to be heartbroken that their kids won't have the same Christmas that maybe they had last year, again, I am thinking of you. I can't change that, but I want you to know that someone sees you and someone is thinking of you. Which is why, again, the priority of this program is to lead the program with your situation. And to know that as everyone else is smiling, there is some hurt that is out there. As I've said many times before, what all of us can do this Christmas is to take a portion of the money that we spend on presents for ourselves or for other people and give it to charity. There are lots of charities that we've supported all year long. You can do the Humpty Dumpty Foundation if you want to give a donation to little sick babies in regional centres. You can give a donation to Food Bank to make sure that people actually are going to be having food on Christmas Day. You can do it for Turbans for Australia, as they literally set up free food stalls. And I hope that you do make the most of that opportunity to give, as difficult as life may well be for yourself. But we learn again today about the number of people who are cutting back. And it's not a few on the fringes, it's 2/3 of Australians are planning to spend less or buy less because of the cost of everything this Christmas. As the Sydney Morning Herald put it, the cost of living crisis is hitting Christmas and it's not going away. Now, the reality is that while the editorial of the Herald is very nice to mention it, they are part of the group that want to move on from the cost of living conversations. But here's the polling. That Christmas has now become a luxury for too many people. Now, I'll read these out so you don't have to squint. 60% of people say that they are finding it harder to make ends meet compared to this time last year. 66% of people say that they will be spending less on Christmas. 68% of people will be buying fewer or less expensive presents this year. 63% of people will be spending less on celebrating when it comes to meals or going out. And 52% of people will not be travelling or going away as much as they did last year, all because everything's bloody expensive. So again, as people who are lucky enough, like myself, to be able to spend time away, to go somewhere, to have a holiday, I'm thinking of the people who aren't able to do it. As we exchange gifts, think about the people who are not able to do so. And again, please give money to charity. That will be able to help some, but not all of these people. Also, think twice about the members of your family that you know that are struggling. You don't turn around and make them feel bad by giving them $50, but find a way to make their life easier on Christmas Day by maybe taking a little bit more of the load, or find a way maybe to buy a present that you know they can't afford for their kid or grandkid. It's something we could all do for each other, and it doesn't have to be $500. It's just something extra to make sure that that day that we all remember as a kid is one that lots of kids around the country will hopefully not associate with difficult financial times. But there are people who, believe it or not, in modern 21st century Australia that's got so much money for $300 billion worth of submarines and tens of billions of dollars for renewable energy projects, but not enough money to eat. There are food lines that are, of course, growing as we speak. Now, according to something that was in The Age today, the Melbourne Food Bank, and again you can donate to them, they've seen a 12-fold surge in demand going into this Christmas. This is what it looks like. These are normal people in a major capital city in Australia. Melbourne's food banks say that they are overstretched and under-resourced in the lead up to Christmas. One service in the inner north is grappling with a 1,200% surge in demand. The Collingwood Drop-In Community Centre and Food Relief Hub, the Wellington, was providing groceries to about 40 people a week at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and last month the charity was handing out frozen meals to more than 500 people every 7 days. That is in the space of 2 years. So while the lockdowns have ended for most, the financial lockdowns have got worse for others. Over the past year, the service has gone from distributing 7,400 kilograms of fresh produce and 700 frozen meals a month to now 12,000 kilograms of fresh produce and 2,000 frozen meals. If you want to help them, search for the Wellington or the Collingwood Drop-In Community Centre. And then, again, one of the people who helps out in all of this, their manager, Chris, says, we're seeing more people turn up that would probably call themselves middle class. They're saying they need to choose between food and rent, so they're coming to us for food. And that's something that we've learnt about when we spoke to all sorts of charity people this year, is the types of people that are coming to them. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, think about it if you had to do it. It's not an easy thing to do. There's some shame associated with it. And people who have never been in that scenario but still have had jobs, and as we've spoken about before, there's about 900,000 people in Australia who have more than one job, and even then they still can't get the ends to meet because cost of living has gone up. The supermarket's more expensive, the rent's more expensive. All of that becomes huge ongoing problems. Power, all of that continues to be more expensive. Now, the CEO class, and it's nice that they sleep outside for one day a year with the Viddies sleep out, but what have they done to help these people? I hope all of them have donated a significant amount of money that is either raised by their staff or from their companies to people who need it this Christmas. Not because it makes them look good, but because it's the right thing to do. Anyone who's got a little more needs to do their bit for those that have a whole lot less. Not government doing it, just you and I doing it. But again, the same polling that told us about the number of people who are going to be pulling back over Christmas, well, have a look at this. Because this is why I get so angry about the Prime Minister and his promise about everything's going to be cheaper if a Labor government was elected back in May of last year. Well, of course, everything's got more expensive. He told a lie. Because all the signs were that things were going to get more expensive, but he told a lie. And people are suffering as a result of it. When people are said if they have a major expense of a few $1,000s, like a new fridge, new car repair, would I be able to afford it? Only just over 40% of people say, yeah, that's possible. For people who are, that they would struggle to afford it, I should say. It's about half of all voters. It's about half of everyone with a job. It's 60% of people that would struggle to pay those things who don't have a job. It's even higher than 60% for the people who are on low incomes. Medium incomes, it's above 50%, and people even on high incomes. Now, as we showed you before, the average Australian's got about $12,000 in the bank this Christmas. And a third of people have duck eggs, zero, nothing. Which means if their car breaks down, they will either have to borrow money, get a credit card, or go without. And going without the very vehicle to be able to go around, let alone to be able to afford the petrol, which is why I've been so angry about petrol tax and about why the government needed to do something to make life just that little bit easier. Not for the people who can afford it, but for the people who can't. Because that is what Australia is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the place that takes care of people so they don't end up having to choose between paying the rent or paying the food. But of course, we have politicians that just want to make the most of the largest taxing government of all time because more people have a job, companies are making profits, and obviously the amount of money that's happening right now when it comes to the Australian dollar and exporting of things like resources means these people are happy as Larry. They're on their way towards a surplus for 2 years in a row, which means they manage the economy beautifully. Well, I'm sorry, you can manage the economy beautifully, but when a third of the country has no money in the bank, when people are lining up around food depots, not just on Christmas Day, not like on that one day a year where you get to see people in soup kitchens. No, we're talking about working people who now are so difficult when it comes to money that some of them live in their car. Now, again, you and I can't fix it, and some people say I harp on about it too much. Well, sorry. The responsibility of having enough is to be able to look and help people who need it, which is why we talk about charity on the show, why we try to highlight the people who are struggling, not as a way of doing poverty porn, but as a way of saying that a TV show that is watched by all types of Australians, from the people who have been able to build a life and pay for their own retirement, to those that are living on the fixed incomes of their retirement, the people with kids, no kids, the people who are new Conservatives or lifelong Conservatives, the people who struggle to make ends meet. And yes, sometimes even the CEOs and the front end of the plane watches the show as well. Well, I want the front end of the plane to know what is happening, not at the back end of the plane, but the people who can't even afford to get on a plane. Instead, they're the ones that put up with the noise, which is why I blow up about things like the second Sydney airport, where the Western Sydney people, well, they get 24 hours of noise. The people who live near Albo, well, they can, of course, have a curfew at 10 p.m. So I was pleased to see the government found some money to give to some of the charities that will be helping people over Christmas. But remember, they got $20 billion more than they expected. $20 billion. The best they could crack off was $450 million, which is not nothing, but still, let's not pretend that this is going to change the world. They're in a position to do something, but they're not really doing much. But I had to notice that that money was happening. And when it comes to the rental crisis, there was one hell of a story that I saw on a current affair a couple of nights ago. It's about a couple in Queensland. Now, I don't know these people. I've got a bit of a connection to maybe who can get in touch with these people. But if you are somebody who can provide rental accommodation in the Toowoomba area or maybe in the Brisbane area, somewhere in between, I need you to send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au, because these people have been booted out of their house and are now looking down the barrel of living in a tent because rental accommodation is so expensive. Here they were on a current affair.
Some real estates don't want pets, so it's really hard. And we got kids. My kids are frightened. My kids are scared. They're scared of being on the streets.
Kate and Adam only moved into their Toowoomba rental home just months ago with their 3 kids.
It took us a good 4 months and we're applying well over 60 to 80 houses.
They moved here 2 hours west of Brisbane because they couldn't break into the city's rental market.
Now, before you start to think, oh, dole bludgers asking for free money, these are exactly the type of Australian that I'm talking about each and every night. People who try, people who really try, and in particular the dad who served his country.
They didn't give us a reason on why they're doing it. They literally just told us, you got to vacate.
I begged them. I was crying on the phone when they found out I got the notice to leave. I said, how are we meant to live?
Adam's ex-army turned windscreen repairer, Kate, works in aged care, but they're not having any luck securing a lease on another property. So they're packing up, preparing to live in a tent.
That's their reality this Christmas. Again, if you're somebody who has got the ability for this family to have somewhere to live, Toowoomba, Ipswich, suburbs of Brisbane, please get in touch. paul@skynews.com.au, paul@skynews.com.au. I'll try and get in touch with people that we know at a current affair, and then hopefully one hand helps the other and those people will be taken care of. But that's the reality of who I think about when we talk about the cost of living stuff every day. Mum and dad who are working, a kid who deserves a roof over their head, people who've done nothing wrong but just get told by the landlord, sorry, go. Now, I don't know what's happening with that property. I don't know if it's being re-let. I don't know if there's going to be more expensive. I don't know. But all I know is that those people need somewhere to live. And if you're in a position where maybe you've got an Airbnb, maybe think twice about the Airbnb for the 6 months or 12 months and give them somewhere to live. Which is why this story kind of got me. That the Prime Minister spent a week off, and everyone's entitled to a holiday. He, of course, was strategically taking one early in December because there are many political people who hope there's an opportunity for him over summer to emerge as sort of mourner-in-chief if there's bushfires. I mean, just look at The Guardian every day. They're praying for bushfires. Metaphorically, of course. But Albonomics means that he's okay. He got a pay rise this year. Those people, you would assume, old-fashioned Labor voters, the people really struggling, well, those are the people who are left behind. And you would have thought that the guy from the Single Parent Housing Commission, all the rest of it, would be a guy who'd just be acutely aware of the difficulty of people like that, and while he can't look after every person individually, would be focused that when you've got $20 billion, rather than crowing about how amazing your surplus is, or refusing to make things like petrol cheaper for that family to be able to get around because you want to get to a surplus next year, that's not really going to help politically. And also a bit of a tin ear here from the Prime Minister. When during his week away that he's just had, he was staying at a winery and he's sampling $500 bottles of wine. You know, okay, the finer things in life, I get it, you're the Prime Minister, but just, again, does this look like the guy who in his DNA gets the people that are struggling, or the guy who has kind of got that in the story of Albo? But the reality is this is a bloke who's now become very comfortable at not just the front end of the plane, but the private plane. That's why politically there are some issues right now when it comes to this particular government. Which again brings me to this conversation about cost of living, about what a responsibility of a government is, about when you have extra, what do you do with the extra? Now, yes, Australia has the best part of almost $1 billion worth of debt. And that was accrued in part because of the guarantees that took place during COVID, and that all would have been worse if Chalmers got his way in opposition. Remember, they wanted JobKeeper to go for even longer, to cover even more people, and they even wanted to buy an airline. So them now pretending they care about debt, no, it's about saying surplus, 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 because we're good with the economy. Well, if the reality of the Australian economy in the lived sense for people is everything that I've been talking about tonight and everything we've been talking about all year, then something's wrong. Something's wrong. Will there always be poor people? Yes. But are we a country that has a safety net to try to take care of them? Yes. Should working parents be going to a charity for food because the rent's too expensive? No. Or their power's too expensive? No. Instead, the Prime Minister will turn around and say, oh, we've done something on cost of living. Yeah, for people with childcare and some people on welfare payments, but what about for the couple who are just working in Toowoomba with their kid? Now, I mention this because the Financial Review is giving us a bit of an insight into the true priorities of these people, and it's not the families that we've been talking about tonight. Because the celebration is a second surplus might be in sight. Yay, we're amazing. Now, of course, the reason they were able to do this was because of soaring taxes. Those soaring taxes, of course, were paid by workers. This government has got more tax coming to it than any government in history. Now, remember what they said about the last mob. Oh, it's the highest tax in government of all time. Well, now they are. But amazingly, third story from the Financial Review here, that there's a chance that in America, to help Joe Biden, they might start cutting interest rates. Now, remember, they've got an inflation figure with a 3 in front of it, which is why the Reserve Bank might start cutting interest rates over there. It probably won't happen in Australia because we've got inflation with a 5 in front of it, and our Reserve Bank has said that until it's got a 3 or a 2 in front of it, we're not moving. But what about that? US rate cuts could aid Labor election strategy. That's what Jim Chalmers thinks. So he's not thinking about lowering in interest rates is good for Australians, it's good for the Labor Party, because the Labor Party won't get turned around and be constantly blamed for the environmental circumstances that see normal, average people struggling to the extent where they're pulling back on what they give their kids for Christmas, on the fact that working people have to line up for food in a country that's run by a left-wing version of a Labor government. Which is why today it was interesting to see the polling that working class Australians are starting to turn on the Prime Minister. They're starting to turn on Labor. And they're not going via the Teals or the Greens or anywhere else. They are, at this stage, seeming like they would go right across the road and sack a government after one term. Now, I still don't believe that's where we're ultimately going to end up. I still think it's going to be a Labor Party with a much reduced number of MPs. They don't have that many to start with. Teals and Greens prop them up, and they get another 3 years in power to be even more left-wing than they currently are. Well, as you will have heard, blue-collar workers are deserting Anthony Albanese for Peter Dutton. The latest Redbridge polling has found that a surge in support for the coalition among workers with vocational or TAFE educations, you know, people who work with their hands, and it is now well ahead of Labor among tradies. Now, I've talked about this before. Tradies aren't always people that are in high-vis vests and part of the union movement. They're people with ABNs, Australian business numbers. People who have to pay tax pay other people or they work for themselves. And the poll found that just 30% of voters think that Labor is focused on the right priorities. 53% of people think they're in the wrong place, just like the wrong track polling that you can read in the Turnbull Times. Worrying for Labor, the percentage of voters who say Peter Dutton and the coalition are not ready for government has dipped below 50% for the first time since the election. So again, people starting to say, well, they're not just the opposition. Maybe they can take over again. Maybe they're the ones who actually care about us. Now, interestingly, another thing that's worth looking here is about immigration, where, again, as you know, this government has turned around and said, oh, we're going to cut immigration in the next couple of years. Yeah, by about 15,000 over the next 3 years. That's the number. But, of course, they've brought in more than a couple of 100,000 more than they planned to this year, so it's not really a cut. And surprise, surprise, while Australia's population, the ABS has actually told us this week, has now hit 27 million people, not 25 anymore. We are now 27 million people. The latest Redbridge polling that we were just talking about before tested people's views on immigration. 70% of people saying that Australian cities are too crowded, 44% and 41% saying that immigrants are a burden on the social welfare system and take jobs from other Australians. This is why we talk about this issue all day, every day. It's because it's where the majority of Australians are. We are a mainstream show. No matter what the enemies want to say, no matter what the competitors want to say, we are the mainstream. And for her part, Susan Ley has seen that there's potential politics in all of this, of course. That means there could be an opportunity, but she too is recognising there are some issues that Australians are willing to turn on this government for.
Not surprised people are turning away, and their disappointment with Anthony Albanese will of course be also because as Christmas comes they're facing increased costs. One of the most startling statistics is that 2/3 of people are expecting to pay less on presents this Christmas and expecting it to be a really tough time. What did we hear the Treasurer say in response to that? Oh well, Christmas 2024 will be a lot better. Try telling that to struggling families.
I had a lot more to say tonight, but let's get straight to the debate. We will do so straight after the break with, among others, Matt Canavan. I'd love to know who you think the winner and loser of not just the week, but the year is, some bold predictions for the year ahead, but most importantly, thank you for always watching this show. Thank you for always supporting me. I love doing this job. It's the best job I will ever have, and it's a job that I will never, ever leave. I can promise you that. I love it so much, so I look forward to an even bigger year next year, the year after that, and the year after that. We're together for a long time, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. A good old-fashioned chat for the rest of the show, as it should be at a Sunday night. Joining us, of course, from Yeppoon right now, Rocky, Central Queensland. He'd be one of the few dry ones at the moment, of course, none other than the great Senator Matt Canavan. Big fella, obviously we're thinking of everyone further north right now.
Yeah, Paul, very much so, mate. It's been pretty wild conditions. I've just flown back in from overseas, though, so missed out on all this craziness last week. Look, fortunately, the cyclone wasn't as terrible as thought, but we've still got this depression to deal with. It is bringing lots of rain too, though, so there's always a silver lining.
Yeah, correct. A lot too much at the moment around certain parts of the state, but still we know it. We know you'll be across it. None other than the wonderful Holly Hughes, representing all of New South Wales, but kind of Liberal. And of course...
kind of a lot Liberal.
Yeah, a little bit. Representing all of local government, but kind of Labor. It's none other than the wonderful Linda Scott. Lovely to see you both here as well. So... you all saw what I had to say about why people are where they are at the moment and why this is not just your classic, there's always poor people. There is a different tranche of people that are going to have a tough Christmas. And yes, the polling, we could talk about this here, where they're turning around and focusing politically. But reality is, if this government wants to go full term, there's not an election next year. There'll be one sort of early 25 if they want to go that long. Every government goes early, so if there's a moment for them to be able to do it, they will towards the end of next year. But, Matt, I wanted to talk to you about whether it's a failure of our country or it's a feature of our country now that people will be queuing for food not just on Christmas Day, but in the lead up to New Year's and on the 15th of January and on the 15th of December, and many people will just walk on by it.
Well, look, it's the best time of the year and it's the hardest time of the year for for many people that are doing it tough. And that's always the case. There's always people that are obviously doing it tough this time of year, and all of us should consider how we can help those less fortunate than ourselves. Of course, it's also, for lots of people, a great celebration of family and coming together. The issue is right now there's more people in that latter category, more people that are doing it tough among us. And while it's not a majority of people in this country that face those difficulties, it is a large proportion of Australians that are facing significant financial difficulties at the moment. Inflation's through the roof. We've had a couple of years now of real wages falling. Our economy overall is still growing, but that's only really because of migration. At a per person level, wealth is actually falling. Your living standards are going down. And people can feel that. They can see that. They can feel it. And I don't think they are seeing the same degree of urgency and concern from their political leaders right now, who continue to speak about emissions targets in decades to come, not how they're going to manage the budget over the next year or two, these practical issues. And if this government has a self-preservation instinct, they'll need to rediscover that ability to connect with Australians and talk about the issues that are front and mind for them over the next year.
Well, you know, this was the Prime Minister. Part of his Christmas message, he's getting in nice and early here, was to talk about we're doing something about cost of living. But I've got to say, every Prime Minister, regardless of the ones you vote for or not, they all sort of end up in a Prime Ministerial bubble after a while, and they start to think when you give the biggest number possible, it shows the government's really helping. But I want to show you this poll first, which is what I mentioned in the editorial. 62% of people are finding it harder to make ends meet this year. 66% of people will be spending less on Christmas. 68% of people will be buying fewer or less expensive presents. 63% of people will be spending less on celebrating when it comes to meals, and 52% of people won't be travelling. So again, we are talking about mainstream Australia. The absolute bulk of normal, suburban and regional Australia match that up with the Prime Minister.
Families are feeling pressure. As a government, our main focus has been on delivering cost of living relief while taking pressure off inflation. Around 1.2 million families are receiving cheaper childcare. We helped up to 5 million households and small businesses with rebates on their energy bills. Real wages have increased for the last 2 quarters.
So, Holly, here's what's missing. If 60-something% of people
Real
have
wages
answered...
haven't increased the last 2 quarters, so I think the truth is missing there for a start.
But literally, I mean, again, 60-something% of people. This is a poll in the Sydney Morning Herald, right? They are, and believe me, Channel 9 newspapers are searching for the bounce back, and they'll be there pushing and squeezing the numbers till there's a bounce back next year. Again, Prime Minister can't turn around in the Prime Ministerial car and pick everyone up off the street, and he can't open up the lodge and turn it into a giant place for everyone to hang out for Christmas. But I just think that he's a little lost in the bubble about the big numbers of millions and thinking that that connects to the millions more who are living it like that.
Well, I mean, for a start, real wages have not increased. Real wages have continued to decline under this government, and significantly so. So there are very few Australians that will be out there listening to that and thinking, I have more money in my pocket than I did 12 or 18 months ago, because that is simply not the case. The thing that this government has managed to successfully achieve in record speed has actually been the creation, I think, of a new class in Australia of working poor. We now have families who have 2 working parents who, after 12 rate rises, increasing inflation and so many cost increases, whether it's energy, whether it's groceries, are absolutely struggling with 2 wages. If you are an average family of 4 with an average mortgage, you have to find $25,000 a year more after tax for your mortgage. Now, if you've got, you know, a fireman and a nurse, or a teacher and a paramedic, you ain't finding an extra $50,000 a year picking up the odd shift. So they've created a working poor, and I think those numbers you reflected on earlier in that survey is exactly where it is.
Well, and obviously the pressure has to come on the alternative government to start to say, well, what do you do? If you took over the reins tomorrow, how does it change? Linda, I'm sure there's part of you that's going, well, isn't this nice, all these Conservatives with their now newly found bleeding hearts? But you know where we all come from. You certainly know where I come from. About just basic humanity, right? That basic normal assistance going, okay, again, I get what the government can do, I get what the government can't do, I also get what the government can seem like it's prioritising. And we saw this year I'm sorry, I'm going to go there. We saw $450 million on something they really wanted to do. Right, and you can travel around the country and advocate for it, and you can take up every single media appearance talking about that if that's what you really want to do. They're not doing that on this issue because if you admit there's a problem, then you have to solve the problem or you own the problem. But what are you thinking about when it comes to these people? I mean, that huge, more than half of the country that's going to have a different Christmas.
Look, I don't think anybody's arguing. I certainly would never argue that this year in particular, there's not a whole lot of Australian families that are finding it really difficult. There's always people who are insulated from cost of living pressures and, of course, from inflation. But governing during a period of record, length inflation, sticky inflation right across the world that started, we know, to bump up when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened and has carried over and is a lot stickier than many economists predicted and most people want. These are really difficult times to govern. Our council in the City of Sydney, we've recently put $1.5 million more towards food grants. This is not a normal local government activity, and yet we absolutely wanted to ensure, Paul, that we were doing everything we could. So there's no argument that people are not doing it tough. But it is important to focus on those cost of living improvements, halving, the cost of prescription medication, making sure that childcare is cheaper, the closing the loopholes bill to make sure that people's wages are going up and they're not getting paid less than the person next to them doing the same job. These are the kind of important things that the federal government has done to make life a little bit easier. It won't solve the problem, there's no argument about that, but similarly, we've come off the back of a government that has invested in stimulus payments during COVID, and as a result,
that every person demanded in the country.
Absolutely.
And that the Labor Party supported
And
actually called for us to extend. They wanted us to extend.
JobKeeper's not a bad thing.
I'm acknowledging
but they wanted to extend it.
But what did it do? It left the greatest debt in living history in Australia
and now you've
for
got to deal with
government.
it.
And so now we've got to deal with that.
But we also
nobody is denying that, right?
But we have demand-side inflation now. It's not supply-side inflation, which was at the end of
the
COVID.
war in Ukraine,
No, that's supply-side inflation. That's when supply chain's difficult. This is demand-driven inflation. This is local inflation because it is now being driven by the high level of immigrants that are coming in, and we're seeing that pressure going onto the economy. We are fundamentally in a per capita recession. That is where we are. We are in a per capita recession.
Now.
The only thing that is keeping the national accounts out of an absolute recession is the level of immigration. That is it. We are in a per capita recession. Australians' life is quality of life is going backwards. There's no way to look around it.
Well, so I was.
And can I say, Paul?
Well, I was just going to say, sorry, you could answer it however you wish, but add to that then, new Queensland Premier today, Stephen Miles, stands up, first sort of moment of I'm in charge, 75% emissions cut. Okay, that means, maybe they'll be able to stave off the Greens in the southeast Queensland seats, but everyone knows that means a cost of transition. Is that really what Australians are demanding right now?
And I'll come back to that, Paul, but I just want to say that another big thing there that Linda left out is this migration issue. That's something this government has done. They botched the recovery from COVID. We had to open our borders. We didn't have to completely open the floodgates, though, and take in a number of people more than the city of Canberra in a year. And they've had no plan to deal with people coming in at that rate, no plan for housing, no plan for infrastructure. And that has led to a significant amount of inflation and pain for a lot of Australians who can't find housing. The government has got to take some blame for that. And to your point too, another thing Linda didn't mention there was the Labor Party promised us, just 20 months ago, promised us that they would cut people's power bills by $275. Sure. And can I remind everybody that the war in Ukraine was already raging. Gas prices had already surged by the time of the election last year. And the Labor Party was standing there saying they would cut your power bills by $275. 100%. And they haven't done that. And now you can see a new Queensland government, instead of focusing on that, focusing on delivering energy price cuts, they are focused on what they think should happen in 2035. Now, Stephen Miles, whatever his dreams are for the election next year, I'll make this bold prediction, Paul. He won't be the Queensland Premier in 2035.
We should
it's easy to make promises for things when you won't be around at that time. What people would prefer from the new Queensland Premier is he makes some commitments for the next year, for the next couple of years. And the simple fact is But as long as Labor stays tied to this green obsession with solar and wind, they are not going to bring down your power bills because they're failed policies.
So,
the policies are bad. It's not the communication, it's not the messaging. The policies don't work. And if you want a government to get your power bills down, you've got to have a government that's going to invest in all types of energy to get more supply of energy up and get prices down.
So literally, even the Grattan Institute saying there's still billions of dollars that need to be spent in all of this. It comes from one of two places, customers or taxpayers. That's what I'm talking about when you turn around and say...
pretty much the same people.
Correct. But when you turn around and say 75% by 2035, it's going to cost more money.
Where do we even begin here? Stephen Miles has cut Rego. That was his first announcement.
No, froze Rego.
So that is just a ridiculous...
That's a cut in Labor speak.
The second thing is that we are experiencing a very significant set of skill shortages. So Matt talks about the houses that we need to build. Where are we going to get the engineers? Where are we going to get the planners? Local government.
You didn't need to bring in hundreds of thousands of students. How are the students helping us?
Let
the students helping us with the skill shortages, Linda?
Economic growth without these skills being addressed.
You brought in hundreds of thousands of students.
Migration.
They're not built. They're not fixing your plumbing.
Correct.
What a newsflash, Matt. Students become trained professionals, and that's a great thing for Australia.
But not straight away, of
They're
course.
actually not
And
supposed
you
to
botched
stay
it.
here when
You've
they
already
finish.
admitted they botched it because now they're cutting the numbers, but it's too late.
To ensure that Australia can power forward and get the things done, like building all those homes. And let's just be very transparent about your plan for the energy transition. It's to move straight to nuclear.
No, it's not.
The most expensive.
No, I want coal. I don't want the transition. The transition is what's costing you money.
This is the coal block.
Don't do the transition. It's failing everywhere. Get back to coal and gas and get people's power bills down.
I'll have some nuclear too, but
we need to do everything.
The cheapest.
I don't think nuclear is the big scare. All right.
We
I'm
have
going to take a break.
AUKUS. We already have nuclear coming in.
All right, we're taking a quick break. On the bottom of the screen very shortly, you're going to see your predictions via our socials about the winners, losers of the year, and also your bold prediction for the year ahead. Plenty more to say before we're done. Royal Report about 16 minutes from now. Thank you very much for watching.
It's all the big issues.
Yeah. We all just had to double check what generation we were because, as you know, there is quite the political conversation about the Zoomer versus the Boomer. In what generation you fall in, you know which one it is. Matt Canavan, of course, I think you'd be on the cusp of millennial or X.
I think I'm 1980, so I think that's X, as you say, just on the cusp, isn't it? I'm not sure.
The rest of us are all in the X here, but even though they're all 21.
We're all X's.
We're the rational people.
Yeah, correct. However, the war of the generations, it seems to be quite fashionable on the internet. In part, this is an example of the Gen Z carry-on.
We are sick of lies. Boomers dominate Parliament, sacrificing our future for their gain. We are Gen Z. The boomers sacrificed our planet for their profit. We have no representation in government. The Gen Z Party is here to change that.
Good luck. Okay. But
clearly we're not their audience. I'm just going to put it out there. We're probably not their audience.
And the Greens desperately hope to play to it demographically.
It's Z. It's Generation Z, Paul.
Correct. Keep wanting to get down to 16-year-olds voting, all the rest of it here. Is it a forever phenomenon that young blame old, or is there now, because there is this sort of cultural divide and people don't seem to politically change the way they used to as the years roll on, there's something in it?
Well, but I think also there's Gen X and Gen Y in there. Where are we? Gen Z just taking over from the boomers and Gen X and Y.
Get out of the way. You destroyed the planet, man.
And I'd like to point out some of the people they had in the boomer character would be a Gen Xer.
100%.
They are not boomers, and I think they're missing the absolute point. But I did read an article on it today where the founder of this movement said he's a centrist. He models himself on Gough Whitlam.
Yeah, I was going to say, anyone who says I'm a centrist, it's
now,
code for lefty.
Linda, does anyone, even in the Labor Party, think Gough Whitlam is centrist?
Well, he's too right-wing for me, as you can imagine. Let me say this. I read that the founder of the Gen Z party was very conservative and he's kind of tricking people. So I think, you just got to be careful about these new startup parties because they're sometimes a bit dodgy. I don't know about this one in particular.
It's just
but,
all the buzzwords, it's all the
I just think that there is this generational issue, right, where it is changing. So typically, especially in Australia, young people tend to vote more progressively, and then as they get to middle age and they get a mortgage, they tend to start.
So they realise how the real world works.
But actually, that's not happening, and there is this kind of persistent change in the Australian voting population that people are voting more progressively as they age, and some of the kind of X generations and younger are actually pushing through and staying progressive. So there is this kind of
the Gen Z party supports nuclear.
What a terrible idea.
Oh, now they're gone.
That's why
Gen Z supports nuclear. So Matt, we might actually be able to pick these guys up because the Greens don't want it, Labor don't want it.
I've got some sympathy for. I've got some sympathy for generation. I call it Generation Z. I don't want to use American terms, but I've got some sympathy for them because the modern economy is not working for that generation. I mean, how can you buy a home? I worry about my children who are now coming of age to get into buy a home. How can you buy a home? What sort of future are they being offered here to have a stake in their community? They're being treated like serfs, basically, and there's not a lot of hope and promise for them. And I think political parties have to respond to that. And I don't think it's this idea of, I don't think young people are left or right. People don't think in those sort of terms. We're nerds. Most average people don't know what left or right is. They want to have political parties that will do something for them. They want to have leaders that will deliver results. And as I say, the results are not there for the next generation. I'm very much worried that we're creating an environment, creating a society, which will not generate a better outcome for the next generation of Australians.
All right, I'll save you all from winners and losers unless you want to throw something else in. Fairly obvious, just enterprise winner, Albo loser. But some bold predictions for the year ahead. We'll start to show those now on the screen. What's definitely happening next year, Holly Hughes?
I was really hoping you weren't going to come to me first.
Matt Canavan, what's definitely happening next year? Matt?
Can I jump in?
Sorry, you're asking me?
That's all right. Linda, you can jump in. It's almost the end. We've done really well all year.
Yeah.
This is the last show, so
Can I jump in and say there's going to be more natural disasters?
Yes.
And I do want to. I've been speaking to Michael Kerr and Terry James today, both mayors up in North Queensland, Cairns and Douglas. What a tough time. You all know, that my job is to support local government, but these mayors are just going absolutely above and beyond during the cyclone or, whatever it's categorised as. It's still awful. Cairns Airport is closed. They can't get people in and out. They're relying on people who've been volunteering for days and days and days. So my bold prediction is there's going to be more of these natural disasters in 2024, unfortunately.
Yeah, and my suggestion here too is if you can, keep the holiday in Cairns, okay? I get the next couple of weeks, but keep the holiday in Cairns. We're in our last minute, so enough thinking time. Have you got one now?
What I'm going to say is I actually spoke at a rally this morning for United with Israel about the hostages and the support of women that we've seen from the UN and other bodies being non-existent if you're a Jewish. Me too, except if you're a Jew. So my big prediction is the end of Hamas. I think Bibi's going to get the job done, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and we see these hostages home.
Good to see. All right, Matt, go for it. You finish us off.
I probably think Trump's probably going to win. And if not that, there'll be a wave of right-wing governments, probably. Right-wing changes happening. Europe looks like it'll fall. EU elections next year. There's a lot of elections on the slate for next year. There'll be big changes probably coming the next year.
I cannot wait to cover next year in American politics. It's going to be fun, but of course we all talk here about Australia. It'll be fun, Linda. Don't worry. It's all okay. You got through the first four. You'll be fine for the next four. All right. Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you for your friendship on and off the air. We'll see you again in 24. Thank you, guys. All right. Quick break. Back with more here before we're done for the year. Royal Report about 5 minutes from now. That's our show for tonight and for the year. Thank you for all of your support throughout this year. I love doing this job. It's the best job I'll ever have. We're not going anywhere, and the channel continues even though I'm on holidays, okay? So keep supporting, keep watching, all the rest of it. And obviously there's even new ways to watch us next year. Thank you so much, of course, to Boris, Mark and all of the management team here at Sky News who give us the opportunity to do what we do each and every day, each and every night. To my wonderful wife, Sian, and our little girls. They give up more than you'll ever know, but I am forever thankful for all of their love. And normally that's where the thank yous finish. But I do have to quickly say to my executive producer, Madison Thorne, who is moving on to greener pastures inside the company, and we'll all see her every day, but she's not going to be on this show full time. This show doesn't happen by accident. All of the polish, all of the detail comes from her hard work and the rest of our team. So to Maddie and the rest of our team, thank you very much for everything you've done for us this year, and enjoy those greener pastures next year. We're all the better for being around you and knowing you. But, yeah, that's our year. We're done. You can follow us now on all of the socials. Keep the emails coming. I will check them every now and then, which is going to be paul@skynews.com.au. Oh, yeah, news poll has also just dropped. Some breaking news ahead of tomorrow. Can we get the graphic done, Maddie? Oh, no, she's already gone. Fair enough. By the way, it's the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. The numbers, you'll have to find out in the morning, won't you? Merry Christmas.